Okay, so hear me out. I know that Sword Art Online, SAO, isn't the greatest piece of art mankind has ever produced. I also know that there are many better anime. In fact, I personally believe that Erased, Steins Gate, and pretty much all of Miyazaki's films are the greatest anime of all time. And finally, I know that SAO has its flaws, and as anything created by humans does. If you keyboard warriors are now going to hate for no reason, I can tell you something. I am not going to listen to you. Neither are the people that actually use their brains to argue and not just their mouth. But if you have legit reasons to disagree with me, that's completely fine. I appreciate your opinion and would love to hear your arguments. Sword Art Online, SAO, is a science fantasy isekai action-adventure anime based on the light novels of the same name by Kawahara Reiki. The anime's first season aired in 2012 and the fourth season ended just a few months ago. In this time, it has become both one of the most popular as well as one of the most hated animes to ever exist. And that is exactly what I will be concentrating on today. Although, as I said, SAO isn't the greatest thing out there, I still consider it to be pretty good. But when people bring up points on why it's bad, their arguments tend to repeat, and worst of all, many of their arguments are plain wrong. In my opinion, this is a result of the popularity and success of SAO. It has become fashionable to hate SAO, and many of these anti-fanboys don't have actual arguments. So what I will do is simply discuss these main arguments in order, explain why they are factually wrong, or off the point, or exaggerated. As you will discover later, a lot of the criticism actually has to do with the anime adaptation. Let's just start with the elephant in the room, shall we? This is literally the most common criticism I hear, and it's kind of absurd for two reasons. First, the statement implies that harem is in some way inherently bad, worse than other genres, or qualitatively inferior. And why is that? Because this specific type of love story feels weird or wrong to you? Because its stories are for some reason predestined to be simpler, blander, and again therefore for some reason inferior? Some people do like harem, other people don't. But as with every genre preference, don't hate on other people for liking the stuff that they like. Second, and much more importantly, SAO is not a harem anime proper, and I will explain why. I think we should start by getting a better idea of what harem as an anime genre actually is. Let's pull up TV tropes. Harem typically features a high school aged male lead with at least two available girls who may be actively interested in him, but at the very least are bound by circumstances to be close to him. Typically, each harem member has a markedly contrasting personality, while usually the opposite applies to the protagonist. Consider how well Kirito and the girls and Klein fit this description. Yes, Kirito is a high school aged male. Yes, there are more than two girls with reasonably contrasting personalities. Yes, all of the girls are sort of actively interested in him. But that's about where the similarities end. First of all, as we will see later, Kirito is in no way a bland character. And second, most importantly, not all of the girls are in love with Kirito. This will come up time and time again, but for God's sake, people, read the freaking subtext, pay attention! I'm really unfortunate this is necessary, but here we go. Asuna is clearly in love with Kirito and he's in love with her. In season 1 episode 11, Asuna confesses her love and he does later as well. Lisbeth is briefly in love during what is season 1 episode 7 of the anime and volume 2 story 2 of the light novel. She explains herself that all that happened to me was an unusual adventure with an unknown partner and my heart was surprised by it. My feelings weren't real, they couldn't be. One loves without haste, with attention and endurance. There's an entire long monologue about it towards the end of chapter 3 of that story, but to summarize, she only fell in love with Kirito due to the unusual circumstances, and the main feeling that remains towards him is one of admiration and friendship. In Aincrad in particular, she admires his friendly and caring attitude while playing a game that may at any moment kill you. Silica isn't ever really known to be in love with Kirito during what is volume 2 story 1 of the light novel. She simply feels affection towards him, which isn't the same thing, and he is like an older brother to her. Quoting story 1, the second to last paragraph, "My big brother for one day." Asada is a bit more complex, because at first she actually hates Kirito, then she turns to consider him a rival. After being overpowered again by her PTSD, she comes to acknowledge Kirito's, in her opinion, real strength. Kirito is the first person she can entrust with her being excluded and stigmatized, the burden of killing, and now the fear of being avenged by Deathgun. Kirito is the first real friend she has had in a long time, and of course all of these are strong feelings. There's also a couple of paragraphs towards the end of volume 6, chapter 13, which hint at her feeling towards Kirito like a child to a mother, which fits in with all of the other dynamics. All in all, Asara does not love Kirito romantically. Alice, apart from her short childhood friendship with Kirito, is actually his enemy until he makes her change her mind about what is really best for the human empire. After that, after seeing how he can defeat Administrator, how he is trying to save the entire underworld from the forces that wish to control it, to protect the people within it and also save Alice herself, she really sees him as a messiah figure. After Kirito turns potato, she believes that he must be protected at all costs and that it is her responsibility because he rescued her from Administrator's corruption. There's a commonly quoted almost kissing scene in season 4 episode 5, but first of all, that one was entirely invented by the anime, and second, it is a moment of severe doubt for Alice. She wants Kirito to wake up and give her guidance because she doesn't know how to go on. And Sugu, of course. I saved her for last. Now, as I showed in the beginning, she has an entire section dedicated to her, so just 2 sentences. Yes, Sugu has romantic feelings towards Kazuto, and no, she does not behave like harem girls usually do. It's complicated and we will discuss it later. So, it's complicated, but there isn't any brutally serious amount of romantic love involved, as opposed to 99% of harems. What's more, most of the girls leave Kirito and Asuna be, support and appreciate their relationship, and do not try to interfere with it. I have had even people in the SAO fandom argue that SAO is half of a harem because this harem-like girl group does in fact exist, and the girls around him sometimes behave like they had a romantic interest in him. And this is where we start to argue about what actually counts as a harem and what not. We can even see that being discussed on TV tropes if we read just a couple of paragraphs further. But I remind you of the very first point I make. Even if SAO is half harem, as Reddito u/Geico Lizard Best Girl put it, people like them still appreciate that, while others don't. Let everyone have their fun. I finally want to address something which may be quoted by supporters of the harem argument. A bunch of the girls say that they love Kirito at various points across arcs. But I remind you that the word love is incredibly imprecise. I know my language nerd will now show through, but just as an example, ancient Greek has 3 to 6 distinct words for love, depending on how you count. It's not exactly a stretch to say that love has several related but distinct meanings. Here, each of the girls feel a different kind of love or compassion towards Kirito. Oh god, what have I done to myself? This will be a long one. I want to start by discussing who Kirito actually is, where he comes from, and what shaped his personality. Kazuto grew up with his aunt and uncle, which he long believed to be his real parents. His grandfather had great influence on him, as he forced him to take kendo lessons, which Kazuto didn't like, and physically abused him when he performed not well enough. After discovering at 10 years old that his parents were dead and that his sister was actually his cousin, he started to distance himself from his family, got into computers and video games, and turned into an introvert. Especially with Sugu, he states that he was intentionally avoiding her even in the house they shared. And now imagine yourself being Kazuto. We don't exactly know how many friends he had, but they probably weren't many, or even any at all. Kazuto didn't have anyone to talk with about feelings, and that slowly changed his personality, no matter what it might have been beforehand. It was harder for him to express what he felt and wanted, although undoubtedly he still had the capacity to be compassionate and caring. But what was there to care for? Sugu, you may guess? He says himself that although he felt guilty, his mixed feelings caused him to stay closed off. If we're honest, at the very beginning of Aincrad, 2022, at 14 years old, Kazuto isn't exactly in a good spot. But there along comes Full Dive. The technology to transport your own soul into another world, kind of. And Kirito becomes an escapist. He escapes to Aincrad, he spends every possible hour in the beta and literally logs into the release game at the second the servers open up. The first couple of minutes of the first ever episode are excellent because if you really consider it, they characterize Kirito with having him only say 2 words.
Link start!
Kirito is so fascinated and in love with the game. You can clearly see that in his first day with Klein. With his typical introverted way of speaking, he expresses his deep knowledge and appreciation of the game's systems. And when the Death Game announcement is made, he isn't shocked for even a minute. One of my most favorite scenes, Kirito accepts the virtual Aincrad as his new reality. Just like that. He escapes the real world because it has less to offer him than Sword Art Online. Man, I'm tired now. That was a long 3 paragraphs about Kirito just before and in the beginning of Aincrad. And I could go on and on at this level of detail, but I think you would be bored as well, very quickly. So let's pick up the pace. Kirito loses his carefree attitude after he loses the Black Cats. In him, the belief that being with other people makes you responsible for them is reinforced by this event. And the turning point, although supported by Sachi's Christmas message, is Asuna. Pondering about what dynamic brings them together and makes both arcs turn for the better. I think it really is the perfect two-way influence. Kirito demonstrates to her that because they're already trapped in the game, they might as well treat it like real life and live, not lose the years they spend in the game. Asuna pushes Kirito to open back up, and in bettering himself, he starts to have a positive influence on the people around him. And just as he did with the virtual, Asuna shows him that there is value to the real world, that she herself is a thing worth fighting for in reality. But Kirito must discover that even after becoming the strongest player of Aincrad, he cannot beat the game with numbers alone. After the game is over and he encounters Sugo both virtually and for real, his strengths are nothing but illusions. In Alo, Kaiba's appreciation for his SAO actions come and save him. In the parking lot, Sugo's being driven mad by the pain saves Kirito. He cannot achieve anything on his own. He's weak, but he has learned that only if he continues fighting for what he loves, he may one day overcome that. In comparison to Asada, for example, Kirito gained the knowledge that one does not only fight for themselves. And he sort of succeeds. The underworld, where your strength is powered by your beliefs, makes Kirito the strongest human to exist. But even defeating the quite literal administrator, he isn't a god. He cannot do everything. Yu-Gi-Oh dies fighting on Kirito's side in chase of the dream called Alice that couldn't even be achieved in the first place. Just saying this almost makes me cry. It's such a wonderful story and once again grounds Kirito in the harsh reality that humans are just humans. Failure is inevitable. He breaks down, he destroys his self, and his friends have to rescue him from his pit of self-hate. Kirito shouldn't always take the blame for stuff that isn't really his responsibility. We see him being haunted by all the terrible events. The Black Cat's death, Diavel's death at the Floor 1 boss, killing Kuradil and the other Laughing Coffin member, driving Sugo mad, shooting Deathkan out of revenge, letting Yu-Gi-Oh die, and letting Alice be taken away by the Integrity Knights. I think that one belongs here as well. Kirito's story is one of loss, of realizing the terrible things that lie beyond his curtain of ignorance, of recognizing that although compassion, love, mental and moral integrity can achieve good, humans, including him, are still fallible, of finding strength. The meaning of strength, that's a really commonly quoted meta topic of SAO, and I think it perfectly fits. If Kirito's story tells us one thing, then it's that strength isn't something static to be found, it's a process. Kirito is one of us, a bit bland on the outside, but a man of so terrible adventures, I think no one wants to imagine themselves as being him. He's allowed to be the hero, because considering how often he fails, it's just a minor treat. And to all the people that keep saying Kirito comes into Aincrad overpowered, this kid is a gamer. He has played the beta more than probably anyone else. You don't see the literal thousands of hours he poured, and does pour during the game, into training, farming, questing and so on. This carries on after SAO ends, and in all games, of course, the skills of his mind aren't just reset. That wouldn't make sense. It's just logical he starts into the underworld with these sword skills, pun intended. After the Kirito character analysis, an Asuna character analysis is only a logical continuation. She's always considered the first tsundere, then damsel in distress character that doesn't actually do anything other than standing around looking funny and needing to be rescued. Oh boy, are you wrong. If there is one family in the entire series I would absolutely not want to be part of, it would be the Yukis. It is repeatedly pointed out by various members of the family that they are very traditionalist, an old family that survived the Meiji Restoration. Asuna is surrounded by her many relatives, where all of the children are part of an eternal race to find out who's the best and the greatest, who enters the most prestigious university, and who gets the highest paying job. Her parents are probably the worst part of this, but to be clear, they just want what they feel is the best for their daughter. And as with Kirito, then Sao rolls around and changes everything. Asuna ends up in the game due to an accident. Her brother bought the nerf gear and Sao, but as he is on business at launch time, Asuna dives in just to try out and promptly gets trapped. This girl, no gaming experience, just being occupied with school and meeting her parents' expectations all her life, is part of an incident that will kill thousands of people more experienced than her. People like Kirito, hardcore gamers that have been waiting their entire life for such an experience, breaking down in the face of death, unable to mobilize their skills. And Asuna is the same. Her first reaction is to lock herself in the safe zone for weeks before somehow getting herself together and starting to play the game, even if she still thinks that she is going to die eventually. Remember that she isn't the kind of mad escapist that Kirito was, or the sensationalistic sadist that POH or Johnny Black were. She sees no purpose in this world other than to play the game in order to escape it as fast as possible. Because Asuna knows, every day she spends in this world, she also loses in real life, falls behind her parents' expectations and her many cousins' achievements. I've already talked about it, but I'll mention it again. Then Kirito comes along and changes that view. She realizes that by actually treating the game as your reality, you can derive much more enjoyment from it. In her and Kirito's case, much more enjoyment. As the monologue in Volume 7 Chapter 1 lays out excellently, she will never be the same after leaving the game. She started to fight for her own goals, independent of what others demand of her. Kirito is now the thing worth fighting for, and her parents and her family are put on the backseat. Just to quickly address her tsundere in the beginning of Aincrad. Yes, it is a common trope, but that doesn't make it automatically bad. Flashbacks to harem section. And there is some reasoning behind it. Asuna has never been in love with anyone and maybe is unsure about how to deal with her feelings. The resolution of her tsundere, however, is a great display of character growth. And now we reach the damsel in distress part in Fairy Dance. To be honest, this is outrageous and I shouldn't need many words to prove you wrong. Asuna tries to figure out the passcode used for her cage and succeeds with a mirror. She immediately rushes towards the first console she can find to log out, but even when being interrupted by the scientists and locked up again, she manages to steal the admin access card for the console. Upon hearing Kirito and Yui approach the tree from below, she throws the card at them, and Kirito later uses it to open the lower gate to Sugo's upper tree sections. Just for anybody who didn't hear the shots, Asuna is the only reason that Kirito and the others can save her and the other 300 trapped SAO players. And for that matter, Asuna almost escaped herself, had she just been a second faster. This isn't damsel in distress, this is literally the most that could have been expected from anyone and then some. Okay, the without plot importance section. I'm quite out of words now. Asuna helps Kirito with literally every boss he kills on screen. She saves his ass from dying more than once. She has her own amazing arc in Mother Susario in terms of standing up to her goals and beliefs in front of her parents. In that, she's even 10 times more protagonist than Kirito. And she doesn't exactly get the short end of the stick in Alicization either. When Kazuto is attacked, she remembers the poison's name and therefore saves his life. She sneaks into the ocean turtle, not a small feat, just to make sure that Kazuto is alright. She's the first one who can trigger any brain activity in him, and that later makes Higa realize how he can restore Kazuto's damaged soul. She uses the Stasia abilities to her absolute limits and becomes invaluable for the Human Empire army's survival. She attacks POH with Mother Susario even though she's almost dead. She creates a staircase to help Alice escape at the World's End Altar. Again, the anime grossly misrepresents her role in War of Underworld. I said I would come back to it later, so here we go. First, let me mention that the Big Brother attraction trope appears to be quite common in Japanese, and that apparently both many writers and watchers enjoy it. Let's not forget that we are still talking about quite a different cultural baseline. In Japanese culture, as well as probably others, cousin-cousin relationships are not the sort of taboo they are here in the West, and that may spill over to sibling relationships. Now, I'm not trying to make some unsupported blanket statement, and I'm definitely not qualified to talk about the topic. So if you want to know more, do your own research and do not quote me on this. Sugo's feelings towards Kirito are complicated. I'm going to quote u/SK Stasia's excellent summary here. She's a teenager, with all that entails. In the 4 years between finding out he was adopted and being trapped in SAO, Kazuto basically became estranged from her. Then, a little after a month in, when it was assumed all the players would die, Sugo is told Kazuto is her cousin, not her brother. Finally, he returns alive and treats her kindly, like when they were little. But just taking her romantic love for Kazuto as a given baseline. For one, she recognizes that her feelings are weird and incorrect, like many Big Brother attraction sisters do not. Second, she appreciates his relationship with Asuna. And finally, she tries to suppress her feelings for the reasons given here. She has even told Kirito about it to maybe help herself cope with it better. All this is very believable character writing, and in my opinion, Sugo is one of the most well-written characters in the series. This is the first point where my immediate reaction would be, yeah, the haters have a point. And to be clear, SAO's antagonists aren't exactly the greatest, they could definitely be better. But despite this, once you actually look beyond the surface level, there's some interesting stuff to be found. Here's a hypothesis: Kayaba isn't Aincrad's antagonist. Oh my, now I will be flamed from both sides, great! But hear me out. Kayaba Akihiko, the inventor of the nerf key and SAO, the envisioner of Full Dive itself. He's just a man so brilliant that he was long removed from normal society. And that made him foster this one dream, a perfect alternative reality, Sword Art Online. Although his online brain copy pushes the boundaries 1,000 times further than Kayaba himself did. First and foremost, he created Full Dive for himself, because he was an escapist, just as Kirito was in the beginning. His role as Heathcliff wasn't just his alter ego, it was his new identity. And when the world connected to that identity was to be ended, he saw no way out than to end himself too. Yes, he seemingly trapped 10,000 people in a game attached to a brain frying your dead for real machine. But that was just the way his mind worked. Probably he was mad. We will never know, but the most dangerous kind of mad is the kind that seems to be completely sensible. Kayaba isn't an antagonist because he does not have fun killing people in his game, or because he has bad feelings against anybody. In his mindset, making death a real consequence of bad decisions is the only way of making the game itself real for the players as well. Just as how Aincrad had become his reality even long before that. Kayaba can't be the antagonist because despite being the problem, he's also the solution to Aincrad and other arcs. And part of the problem lies with the players. Kirito for being an escapist, Asuna for being naive about a technology unknown to her. The most hated of all antagonists is probably Sugo, and to be honest, there is not much I can say in his defense. He's arrogant, craves for recognition and success by all means, he's a pervert, he's the most asshole kind of capitalist, and so on. He isn't trying to drive hundreds of SAO survivors crazy just for fun, he's using them to get money and success. For Sugo, all ends justify the means, and yes, to be honest, that's a common antagonist pattern. Consider that Sugo comes from a similar environment as Asuna does, a family always demanding him to excel. The added pressure by his soon-to-be in-laws, the Yukis, didn't really help that. And to be fair, many of his values aren't that wrong, or rather a lot of people would agree with him on the fact that having a lot of money and success is a good thing. There simply isn't enough there in this character, and yes, that could be considered a flaw. But seeing that Fairy Dance is not simply about Kazuto versus Sugo, it isn't the most stifling issue. If I had to name one antagonist as most forgettable, it would probably be Shinkawa Kyoji. In fact, he wasn't even in the first script drafts. But I really pity myself for that. If you look into him, he's a similar character to Sugo in terms of backstory. He's pressured to do well at school and later take over his father's role as a hospital director, in addition to being bullied badly by his classmates. In his childish naivety, he became an escapist and wanted to give up his real life for the virtual world. See the parallels yet? He's just like Kirito, except Kirito met Asuna, and Kyoji's dreams were obliterated when his GGO agility build dropped out of the meta completely. Add up his hatred of the players who now dominate the game together with his obsessive love for Asada, and you have a mad teenager trying to kill both himself and his loved one, but not before eradicating a bunch of top-level agility GGO players with a death gun pseudonym. Of course, his brother Soichi, aka Sasa, is not to be understated, being one of the most faithful Laughing Coffin members and becoming attached to real-world killing just as POH and Miller long before him. In my opinion, both of these boys were long broken, one by a reality that didn't live up to his expectations, and the other by illnesses that meant he was always more powerful in the virtual than the real. In a sense, you may be sorry for them. And in fact, Asada is trying to reconnect with Kyoji, as recently as the beginning of Alicization 6 months after the fact. I'd love to see his redemption, although I doubt it will happen. No, there won't be cool battle footage in this section because Administrator Kanella-san decides to be naked for quarter of a season. I mean, what the fuck, A1 Pictures? We get it, her hacking gave her the best body there is to obtain in the underworld. And that's actually the crucial part, leading me on to her backstory. Yes, once again, it's backstory time. We don't know where Kanella got the ability to actually decipher English system commands when the underworld language was entirely Japanese, even without loanwords. But we know that from that point on, her only desire was to obtain more and more power, to ensure that nobody would be more powerful than her. The ultimate desire of the nobles descended from the children raised by the evil-spirited Wrath employee. She had control over everything except time. She found the command list and halted her aging just before her natural death. She tried to offload her Flaglight into another human when its capacity reached its maximum. But years after that, she still says that she thinks about death every day. Fear drives humans to do insane things. And let's also not forget that she merged herself with the Cardinal System, a program designed to regulate and balance the world that was first developed for SAO itself. To kill two boys that just cut through the Integrity Knights like no one else is only a logical conclusion from her point of view. I think it is very interesting to see how one can justify almost every one of her actions after the Cardinal fusing with that base reasoning. Gabriel Miller, our newest and most powerful antagonist. To be honest, this guy is fucked up. He kills people just to experience the vanishing of their souls or something. Man, he is mad. But at the same time, I find myself utterly fascinated by such a persona, with how much intrigue and planning he strives for all his goals. And almost succeeds, I remind you, in literally stealing the most valuable piece of technology, a human-level AI, from the fortified most top-secret Japanese military base. He's an incredibly smart guy, very cunning in speech, and together with Wasago, he's an insane force to be reckoned with. Wasago Casals, Prince of Hell. Man, do I love that guy. I think he is one of the most interesting characters in the series, and let me explain why. Again, we're looking at backstory. Wasago was, literally, a son of a bitch. His father prevented his mother from aborting because he wanted Wasago to serve as a kidney donor to his older, legitimate son. That is some asshole reason to be born. The name Wasago is literally the name of a demon, and his later nickname reflects that. He only manages to get to Japan as an adult by joining a Korean criminal syndicate, and only actually enters SAO out of necessity. Take a step back for a moment. This guy was never loved by anyone. His mother didn't want him, his father instrumentalized and despised him, and his only experience with Japanese people was his father, who, to be honest, is quite an asshole. No wonder that as soon as he entered SAO and encountered all of these Japanese people, he wanted to kill every last person. No one ever taught him how to control his feelings, or what the meaning of compassion is. And then, after SAO was over, Wasago was still only left with two feelings. The hate for Kirito and Asuna, who dwarfed so many of his plans, and the desire to find another experience like SAO. And both opportunities came in the form of Project Alicization. No wonder he is so eager to finish what he had started with Kirito all those years ago. I think Casals isn't the only one to be blamed for his terrible actions. His father and mother for treating him terribly and not really wanting him in the first place. His father for not enabling him to start a new, proper life in Japan. Miller for providing fertile ground for his hatred of the Japanese and an opportunity to continue the horrible things he had started in SAO. POH is an incredibly smart guy, maybe even smarter than Kirito, and you can only imagine what may have become of him if he had been led on the right track. Yes, I went into a lot of detail with all the antagonists, and this section may have been exhausting, but I hope that I demonstrated how there are layers upon layers to be found behind every antagonist in SAO, and how most of them aren't just evil for evil's sake. It's a good take on the fact that there is no black and white, and people aren't just good or evil, something I adore in all fiction. My main criticism would be that the anime fucked up the portrayal of many of these characters, and even the light novels could have done a better job. I kept this one for last. How is Kirito still alive? How can he suddenly overpower the system admin? Why can he suddenly hack to save Yui? How are all of these freaking people still alive? And there are more. I see quite a lot of people simply saying, this happened and it doesn't make sense, so SAO is crap. I'm going to get to all 4 of these, but first, guess what? SAO is a fictional story taking place at a time that is now almost the present. Wow. And to make its story work, it needs to handwave some stuff. We don't have nerf gears and soul translators, but neither do we have lightsabers. So start suspending your disbelief for the right things. We don't know how the game servers of SAO or the nerf gear itself or whatever work. So stop imagining it like it is real world technology. It isn't, it's sci-fi, okay? On to the actual problems. Let's roll up this one from the start. The main quirk of SAO, of course, is that once a player's avatar dies, as determined by the SAO game engine, the player's nerve gear is instructed to fry their brain with immense microwave radiation. If we look at this from a high-level computer science standpoint, there's probably an instruction sent by the server to the very powerful computer in the nerve gear to execute this deadly operation. We know from several canon sources that the delay between dying in game and in real life is something like 15 to 20 seconds. Among probably other things, this is so that the item Kirito obtains in the Red-Nosed Reindeer story can actually work. Activate it within approximately 10 seconds of someone's death and they will be rescued. And here we are, in the boss chamber of Floor 75. Kirito versus Heathcliff, aka Kayaba. Judging from Kayaba's words both before and after the incident, he's really impressed by Kirito and what that one boy has achieved. So in such a battle to the death, it's reasonable to assume Kayaba deactivated the kill switch just in case. After all, he can just manually kill Kirito once he's defeated. And the same probably goes for Asuna. Kirito wanted him to protect her from suicide, and there's no reason to believe he made a false promise. Finally, I get to the point. Kirito has by this time grown so much that he has gathered an impressive amount of mental strength. Kayaba has just killed the only reason Kirito is alive right now, why his character turned for the better. So, he breaks the system, keeps his avatar present and stabs Heathcliff. In the anime, this is probably where many people's waifu cups dropped. But let's open our light novel 1, chapter 22 to 24. Asuna broke the game as well, you remember. She overcame a paralysis effect that an administrator put in place. Kirito is filled by a rage beyond any scale, after feeling the resignation that without her, life is not worth living. It's revenge, and remembering that she broke the system first, he follows her and manages to end the game for everyone. Let's also not forget that he expected to die after this, that he expected Asuna to already be long dead. Kayaba afterwards talks about a lot of the stuff I already discussed, but he himself seems to be oblivious as to how both Asuna and Kirito managed to break the limits of his world, a world that transcends all rules and limits of reality. Nobody knows is the answer, but as is reinforced time and time again in SAO, the limits of our real technology don't apply here. For the second one, the anime is to be blamed as well. Kayaba himself tells Kirito the account password of the Heathcliff admin account, which still has its privileges because Alo is an SAO early build clone. Why is Kayaba still alive, you may now ask? Well, Kayaba himself gives a cryptic hint, but the more accurate answer is that he uses the deadly microwaves of his nerve gear to scan his brain and even flack light with high precision. And this artificial copy of him lives on, guiding the future development of Full Dive. He saw that Kirito may be an important tool for this, which we see confirmed by the Seed release and the Project Alicization incident. So he figured it was worth rescuing him. Third one, you know the term artistic license? It's basically the counterweight to what I mentioned earlier. Artists, in this case writers, apply artistic license to display things in more interesting ways than they would actually be in real life. The audience then has to suspend their disbelief for it. In this example, we see Kirito hacking away at some sort of keyboard while computer windows with scrolling text pop up in front of him. Classic hacking stuff, I'd say, and yes, I in particular am commonly pissed by such scenes because I know more about hacking than the average citizen. But guess what? Kirito isn't hacking. In fact, he explains what he did. Remember who Yui actually is? An AI related to the Cardinal system, and just with that, we can infer that she has some very high privileges in the game. And she uses the console, logs in, to defeat the boss, after which she is deleted by Cardinal. But the console is there the whole time, and she never logged out. Why would she? There's nobody around that could do malicious things. So Kirito just has to rush and use her account with high permissions to copy her data into his nerve gear and materialize it as an item. He wasn't hacking, he was probably just figuring out some user interfaces he never encountered before. And once we reach the underworld, things really get off the rail. I think just by the similar mechanics of diving into the underworld versus normal full dive tech, people are misled to believe that they actually behave alike. And yes, if the underworld isn't running accelerated, you can actually dive into the underworld with normal ambuspheres and nerve gears. But Soul Translation is nothing like full dive. Nerve gears are a machine-brain interface that runs via electrodes and very precise electromagnetic impulses. STLs? They read your literal soul and manipulate it to make you feel like you are in another world. We see early implications of this. The incarnation system allows for people to have their magical and physical strengths and abilities to be determined by their beliefs. There's an entire dynasty of people, Hynorkia, that truly believe their weapons are unstoppable. Therefore, their weapons actually become unstoppable. But related to the incarnation system is that we see the spirits of deceased or sort of deceased people interact with the living in various ways. At first, it's just visions. Then they actually manage to physically interact with the world and do crazy things. The underworld is set up excellently so that within the first episode, we get the idea that things do not necessarily abide by strict rules. Even the magic, the sacred powers, is harmlessly rule-bound in comparison to other stuff that happens. To quote Brandon Sanderson's first law of magic,
an author's ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic.
In my opinion, Kawahara goes out of his way to show us how the memories and beliefs of the people in the underworld, the soft magic we're talking about here, can do many things, but always depends on said things, the memories, the beliefs of the people. Only because Sugu, Asuna and Asada believe Kirito could be forgiven and be their savior did he reawaken. Only because Yujiro believed these same things could he help Kirito defeat Casals and Miller. This is not a Deus Ex Machina. This is a resolution set up for 2 seasons through Yujiro and Kirito with a magic system that the audience understands well enough to suspend their disbelief. Now, again, I remind you that we are not talking about the sacred arts. This is an entirely different magic system that is actually pretty hard. And if you want to learn more about hard and soft magic systems, Tim Hickson has 2 epic videos on the topic. Go check them out. Let me just say this. A1 Pictures, you fucked up the anime. Seriously guys, there are so many bad decisions in every episode I won't even mention one because it would take hours. You are lucky that you got most of the gist of all of the stories across and didn't create any plot holes. So many errors, unnecessary scene cuts, unnecessary edit scenes are there. There's a great post on how, for example, Asuna was especially badly treated in the latest season. Go check it out. But to summarize, many of the sketchy explanations, plot points which are difficult to comprehend, and characters that seem to be bland or uninteresting are to be blamed on the anime adaptation. And unfortunately it hasn't improved, and I believe Kawahara himself must be sad for the anime so grossly misrepresenting his work at times. I don't think the manga is great, but at least it sticks to the plot. If SAO only mildly sparked your interest, I would strongly recommend reading the light novels. I did a full reread of the first 10 novels in researching this, and it was once again amazing. So that's all I wanted to discuss. Over 8,000 words in all episodes, and I could have gone on for days. If you came in here not liking SAO, and kept an open mind, maybe I have convinced you to reconsider your opinions. Even if not, I hope you like this video series, the first video essay sort of content I have ever created. Together with this video, I will be publishing a full-length video with all of the content, and it should be linked here. A big thank you again to all the support I've received over the last year, in particular for this series. You guys killed it on the harem episode, which quite frankly shouldn't be a surprise to me. Thank you for watching, and until next time, goodbye. Scheiße, ist der Satz kompliziert.